So we're going to talk about foreign policy during the Progressive Era, and then we'll take a peek at your weekly question, which we'll kind of start talking about today and maybe finish talking about a little more specifically next time. So let's peek at the weekly question. Weekly question, here it is. So last week was compare and contrast new nationalism and new freedom. And this week is explain the reasons for and describe U.S. participation, in World War I, recognizing, of course, that they did not call it World War I during that time period because they really weren't planning on having a second one, so they weren't predicting. Describe how World War I transformed the roles of women, African Americans, and Hispanic Americans. I do think your danger on this one is overstating this a little bit, because typically when I ask a question like this, I haven't exactly asked this question before, but I've asked similar things. And typically what I get is, now women were in the workforce to stay, and they were going to make as much money as men. And it's like, none of that stuff's true. Women temporarily are in the workforce for World War I, but they really kind of go back home afterward. Now, I know you're going to say, like, but what about the flappers? And, the women became, more feminist during this time period. It's like, yeah, maybe, and maybe not. This is one of the things that makes me nervous when I read your answers is when you have the tendency to overstate stuff. And you'll say stuff like, because of this, the entire world changed, which might be true, but you've also got to say why the entire world changed. But don't overdo it. You know what I'm saying. And this is not going to bring equality to African Americans, and it's not going to lead to a civil rights movement. And it's just say what it does, but don't pretend it does more than it does. It does change some stuff. It does. It's kind of a big deal, but it's not, the biggest deal. It's not, I don't know, just don't overdo it. That's all I'm saying. All right, and let's see if there's something else I wanted to say about this. Nope, not right now. Okay. And what else? Oh, I did put in the things to study for the next quiz. Okay, so that is in the course documents page. So make sure that you look at that. Okay, don't forget to look at that. It's important. You'll want to study, probably. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just like to wing it. Maybe you want to live dangerously. I don't know. Teens. Could be. All right. So, making the world safe for democracy. World War I. Sounds very good. All right. Let me ask you some questions. No, let's wait. No, let's start. I'll ask you some questions. So I want to see. I'm going to look at the chat in case you guys chat or instead of say stuff. So, tell me anything you know about World War I, how it started, who was president, why we got involved, why the rest of the world got involved, anything you know at all about World War I. Let's hear it or see it. Feel free to chat in the room if you like, or say stuff.
Because the Serbian dude of the Black Hand, what was it? Just like, it was a labor union, right?
Yeah, labor union.
Shot the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in Serbia.
It is true. So that guy must have been extremely popular?
Well...
Start a whole world war?
Serbia was allied to Russia, and then Russia was allied to France, and Austria-Hungary was allied to Germany, and then when Germany tried to attack France, they went to Belgium, which is allied to the United Kingdom, which then brought them into the war.
This is sort of the alliance problem then. It wasn't so much that everybody loved Franz Ferdinand. It was alliances. Is that what you're saying? Germany sank a ship? Yeah, they probably did. They sank the Lusitania, which is what everybody likes to talk about, which is technically not even a U.S. ship. does drive me crazy that kids are really sure. Oh, crud. Ah, ah, sorry. I'm looking at my phone because I'm sorry. Because I think it's my doctor who needs to schedule my surgery, but I will just call them back because you're way more important than my shoulder surgery, right? So, Germany sank the Lusitania, which is cruise ship, British, but was going from New York to Scotland, I think it was. But we also maybe had some weapons that we were shipping over there. But you're right. Also, they were sinking a bunch of U.S. cargo ships because we were selling at first to both sides, and then after we were selling to both sides, a little bit more to oh, uh, just England and France. Okay. All right. Anything else you know about World War One? That alliance thing that you were talking about, that's pretty complicated stuff, and that seemed to matter quite a bit. It's true. What else do you know? Do you know who's on what side in World War One?
The Central Powers and the Allies. The Central Powers, the Ottoman Empire, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy for half of it.
Okay,
And
very nice.
then the Allies was everyone else, and then Italy for the other half.
Yeah, Italy's interesting because they switched sides in both wars. Kind of like Italy for that, or I don't know, maybe we don't. Okay, nice job on that. Very good. I think Connor's the World War expert, at least World War One. My guess is if you like World War One, you probably like World War Two as well. And I don't mean like you like it, but I mean you know stuff about it. So, all right. And England and France are typically on the same side. That's pretty normal. And the Soviet Union is on the same side as us. In, well, it's Russia when the war starts, and then they have a revolution, and then they quit, and then we kind of take their place. It's not exactly how it works, but it's kind of how it works. And then World War II, they're on the same side as us as well. You know, Hitler, nobody wants to be on his side. All right, anybody else want to say anything else? Trying to get you kids to talk. Do you think everyone else is working on their physics? Pre-cal? That's what I think's going on. Not gonna lie. I think that's what you're doing. All right, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So World War One's the main thing in this chapter, but there's stuff that happens before it that we should probably talk about because there's 3 progressive presidents, and they don't all have to do with World War One. Although, no, they don't. They don't. I mean, we'll find some carryover, but they don't all have to do with World War One. So, progressive president number 1, Teddy Roosevelt. Progressive president number 2, William Howard Taft. Progressive president number 3, Woodrow Wilson. I don't think I know his middle name. I don't know Teddy Roosevelt's middle name either. But they will have somewhat different political philosophies and somewhat different international policy, diplomacy kind of thing. So, as you would expect, Teddy Roosevelt is probably the most aggressive, Taft is the least aggressive, and Wilson's the most complicated, I think. But you also don't have to agree with any of those conclusions. So let's look at what they did. Now, foreign policy, our main focus probably during this era is trade. We want to make sure everyone will trade openly with us and not restrict trade with the United States because we are becoming a major manufacturing nation. Yes, a major manufacturing nation. I'm going to ask you another question to see if you're with me. Are we still a major manufacturing nation? Yes or no? What do you think? Do we still make stuff in the United States?
Yes, but not as much.
Okay, that seems fair. Yes, but not as much. What kind of stuff do you think we still make?
We make a lot of like high skilled stuff, so like a lot of aeronautics and stuff like that. A lot of car manufacturing.
Yep, we
Stuff
make.
that takes a lot
A lot
of
of luxury goods.
yeah, not
Okay.
quite luxury, but
Yeah, I think probably some luxury goods like
a lot
fancy
of industrial stuff.
industrial stuff,
Yeah.
technology stuff. Although sometimes, like, we'll outsource some of the circuit kind of stuff, but put it all together here. That happens some. Some cars, we still make cars. So we make some stuff. I think they make those Yeti cups in Austin. There's my fake Yeti cup. That's definitely a luxury item. China makes more stuff than us, but we tend to make, like you said, the more complicated stuff, although that's becoming less true. But the stuff we used to make that made us $1 zillion, someone else makes and doesn't make them as much money, like, you know, like steel or plastic manufacturing. Although my brother works at a plastic plant, and they just make, it's resin is what he makes. He gets mad when I call it a plastic plant. You know, we all, and my other brother makes cheese. We still manufacture cheese in the United States, which is very important. My other brother is an electrician. So there you go. Now you know what the whole family does. All right, now we'll go back to our business. We wanted to keep the world safe for democracy, but also safe for trade. So we wanted to enforce the open door policy and the idea of liberal internationalism, the idea that economic and political progress go hand in hand, and liberal internationalism, economic and political progress will be a progressive definition of liberty or freedom during this time period. So freedom to trade, freedom to vote, that sort of thing. Now, Roosevelt will say that his proudest accomplishment was the Panama Canal. So make sure that you pay at least a little bit of attention to how we got the Panama Canal, because if Roosevelt says it's his best accomplishment, and Roosevelt's an important guy, we should probably know. So you know that people who lived in the Western Hemisphere, the Americas, have thought for a long time that we should have a canal. And either in Nicaragua, somewhere in Central America, but probably Nicaragua or Panama. Panama is the narrowest place. Nicaragua would have been the easiest place to build. It's not as rocky. But they went with the shortest place, which was Panama. We write several treaties regarding this canal. Now, there's not a test question about the treaties, but I think it's moderately interesting that the first treaty, Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, was written in late 1840s, I think it's 48. And it essentially said that the US would build the canal and the British would make sure that it stayed open and safe, because we didn't really have a military to speak of. And then this treaty, which is signed in the 1890s, I think it's 1890s, Hay-Pauncefote, it said that the British would not need to defend it because, you know, at this point we had a navy and we could defend it ourselves. And then this one, Hay-Bunalvaria Treaty, that is between the US and Panama. And Hay is our dude, and Bunalvaria is the Panamanian dude who's not exactly Panamanian, but he's kind of Panamanian. He had worked for the French company that tried to build the canal before we did. So we actually asked the Colombian government, because Panama was a colony of Colombia, we asked them, hey, do you mind if we build a canal in Panama? And they said, yeah, we don't want you here because you cause a lot of trouble. Look what you did in Chile. Look what you did in Venezuela. Look at the mess you made in the Spanish-American War. No, we don't want you here. We'd rather have French here. So they invited the French to build the canal. They were not terribly successful. By not terribly successful, I mean they were unable to build the canal. And it seemed like their issues were distance. I mean, France is a lot farther from Panama than the United States, so transporting stuff back and forth was an issue. Technology, they didn't have quite the manufacturing technology we did, so our construction equipment was better. And 3, we were much better at killing mosquitoes than the French are. I have not been to France. I don't know if you have. This may be the one time you go like, yeah, I've been to France. That'll be something you want to chat about. I haven't been to France, but I don't know if they have as many mosquitoes as we do. And we didn't get all of our training about mosquitoes at home. We got some of our training about mosquitoes in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. So we knew how to kill mosquitoes. And if you're wondering, what does that have to do with building a canal? Are you wondering that? Of course you are. If the mosquitoes bite you and give you yellow fever, or what's the other thing you could get, malaria, then you can't finish building the canal. And that was one of the problems the French were having. So we got really good at killing mosquitoes. It's really not that hard. Apparently, you just drain the swamp, not a Trump analogy. You really do literally drain the swamp so the mosquitoes don't have a water source. Or you can pour, I think it's lime, L-I-M-E, on them, which is some kind of powder that dries stuff out. Not lye, because that's an acid and that would be bad. Okay, all right. So now we've talked about killing mosquitoes. Let's go on. All right, 3 progressive presidents, 3 different styles of diplomacy. So Teddy Roosevelt's style of diplomacy is often referred to as gunboat or big stick diplomacy. And he said, he had an analogy, or not an analogy. Well, maybe it is. No, it's just a phrase. It's an old proverb or something. Speak softly, but carry a big stick, and you will go far. So the thought is, if you have a big military, strong military, you might occasionally use it, not very often. You don't really have to make threats because people just go like, oh my gosh, they'll kill us if we don't do what they want. So we occasionally use the military. The biggest instance of that during the Roosevelt administration might have been Panama, where when we asked Colombia if we could build the canal and they said no, then Roosevelt said, I believe the Panamanian people are longing for independence. And they took the hint and they said, yes, we are, and declared independence. And we sent the military there to make sure that Colombia didn't come in and prevent them from becoming an independent country. So we might have overthrown the Colombian government so we could build a canal in Panama. Or we may have freed the Panamanian people. It depends on how you look at it. So there you go. All right. U.S. military does intervene many times during this era, and we use the Roosevelt Corollary, which is an extension to the Monroe Doctrine. Oh, good, a chance for me to ask you another question. Are you ready? Do you know what the question's going to be? Of course you do. What was the Monroe Doctrine? I got all day too, so you let me know. All right, what was the Monroe Doctrine? As I drink water from my fake Yeti. Fetty, it's a fake Yeti. If you people don't answer me, I'm just gonna log off. I'm gonna cry.
What was the question you cut out?
What was the Monroe Doctrine? I typed it in the chat as well, but I don't know if you guys look at the chat. It is related to colonization in the Americas. Are we in favor of that or opposed?
Oh, wasn't that the one where we said if any other people try to colonize the Americas, we would go to war with them?
That was the one. We told them to cut it out. No more, no further colonization in the Western Hemisphere. That's what we told them. Yep. And by them, I mean European nations. So mostly France and England and Spain and that other nation that we don't care as much about, Portugal. That's who I'm thinking. Maybe the Dutch. Do we care about Portugal? Do you care about Portugal? Did they actually colonize in the Americas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Portugal.
And like the entire country of Brazil.
I know Brazil's pretty big, I hear. I don't know. I've seen it on a map. It looks almost US sized, but yeah. Oh, excuse me for the yawning there. Sorry for that extra yawn. Oh, I apologize. Now, the reason that we said the Monroe Doctrine when we did, which is, it depends on whose date you like, either 1819 or 1823, is because really Spain was on the decline at that point. So most of the Spanish colonies were declaring independence in that era. And, England was done. It was either us or Canada, and they, Canada and England had kind of made their deal at that point. And there were a few islands. They were definitely leaving us alone at this point. So, Spain's on the way out. Nobody's really that interested in Brazil at that time period just yet. So we say this when we do because we know Spain's on the way out anyway. Now, do we have the ability to enforce our threat in 1819 or 1823? Do we have a big military back then?
I mean, like, we could try.
We could try, because we had just won a war of 1812, but most of those battles were fought like along the Great Lakes or the Canadian border. So it's pretty controlled. So, we weren't up for an international battle, but, we were far enough away too. So that distance thing made a huge difference. Now, by now, I mean 1900s, early 1900s, we have one of the best navies in the world. And while it's easier to span that distance of the Atlantic Ocean, it's still a deterrent for sure. And we're going to add to the Monroe Doctrine with the Roosevelt Corollary. So a corollary is an addition. So the Roosevelt addition or corollary to the Monroe Doctrine says, not only is there no further colonization in the Western Hemisphere, but if you mess with somebody and it's not in the best interest of the United States, we reserve the right to intervene, whether it's political or economical or military. And it's not just the Western Hemisphere. So no longer are we saying like we're the boss in the Western Hemisphere when we really couldn't enforce it. Now we're saying we're the boss everywhere, everywhere. So we are the world's policemen. So I don't know if that's a good job or a bad job. Probably doesn't pay well, might be expensive, but we are going to declare ourselves to be the world's policemen. And we will intervene pretty regularly in the Roosevelt administration, but it's usually in smaller areas, islands. It's more for military and strategic reasons or to protect trade routes. So there you go. We also send the Navy on a world tour during this time period. And most people go like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing Navy. Let's not mess with them. Except Japan, who goes, oh my gosh, that's an amazing Navy. We don't have one of those. Perhaps it's time to get one. So they built one. All right. Taft is not going to be as overtly aggressive. So he will practice something called dollar diplomacy. Dollar diplomacy. It doesn't mean it only costs $1. It means that if you don't do what we ask you to do, then we will not give you funding. So we will deny foreign aid to you or protection or whatever it is we happen to be providing for you if you don't do what we ask you to do. So we'll either stop writing the check or we'll never write the check. So we're either cutting you off or we're not giving you stuff. Depends on how you look at it. The reason we switched to this is Taft feels like it will allow us to send our military fewer places, so fewer interventions, and it'll probably be cheaper in the long run, which might be true. Might be true. All right. And the last progressive president, Woodrow Wilson, practices something called moral imperialism. Moral imperialism, where he says that we will intervene if you are not doing the right thing. And this is tricky when you have a government or a president, really, who wants to practice a moral form of diplomacy. This is problematic. I'm not trying to be judgmental here, but that's the problem. It's judgment. Who gets to decide whose actions are moral and immoral? In this instance, it's Wilson. We will occasionally have other presidents who will claim a moral authority to do something as far as foreign policy. FDR will be one, but the guy he's going up against is Hitler, so it's, it's Hitler. And then we will claim moral authority when we're fighting against communism. That'll become a little more iffy, except I know Stalin's bad, I'm aware of that. But the guys after Stalin, we don't even always remember their names, so I don't know if they're as bad, although they might be. Khrushchev's a little rough, but I can't really spell his name. It's got a lot of H's in it. And then Jimmy Carter will bring back moral diplomacy in a different form, and that's kind of an interesting thing too. Although we do all love Jimmy Carter, I think. He goes around building Habitat for Humanity houses and stuff. He's a super nice guy. But when you've got a guy trying to decide what's right and wrong and basing your foreign policy on that, the problem with this is the application of it tends to be inconsistent. So the country that we probably harass the most because of moral imperialism is Mexico. Goodness, should we harass our neighbor like that? Mexico's going through a revolution during this time period, and some of their leaders Wilson likes more than others. He will declare from time to time which leaders he likes. Usually if he declares that he likes a leader, that leader will get assassinated. So it's not always good for you if Woodrow Wilson says he likes you. So it's problematic. Yeah. All right. So moral imperialism will intervene or fund countries based on whether they do the right thing or not. The U.S. had a responsibility to teach the world the lessons of democracy. And part of why we will intervene in Mexico so often is we think that it is unsafe for free trade and that the people they are picking were not democratically selected. And then Mexico will kind of ask us, why do you think you have the right to tell us how to run our country? And then we'll mostly say, because we can. And then we'll send troops to keep certain port cities open. And mostly we intervene for, as you're probably going to guess, economic purposes more than moral purposes in Mexico. My estimation, which again, you don't necessarily have to agree with. You could, but you don't have to. All right. Woodrow Wilson and World War I. So before, let me stop sharing for just a second and look at your almost faces. Okay, a few of you have your faces, and then one of you has that scary thing. So before we go on, do you have any questions about any of those three presidents? Do you know who the three presidents were? You guys are making me nervous today.
I wanted to ask why the presidents got assassinated after.
The Mexican ones?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Mexican Revolution is such a big and complicated thing. And they didn't all get assassinated, but 2 or 3 of them do. And it's really, Mexican Revolution is really about land redistribution. And almost everybody who wants to be in charge, there's like 3 or 4 different factions. And almost everybody who wants to be in charge wants land redistribution. They just may not want as much of it, or they may want it done in a different way. So at the beginning of the revolution, the more conservative people take control, and that happens in the Russian Revolution as well. And that frustrates the less conservative people. So they either assassinate or push out some of those leaders. When one of the military leaders, Venustiano Huerta, becomes in charge, that's when, I think that's the one that Wilson calls the butcher. He's not the only person who calls him that, but he's a pretty brutal dude. Pancho Villa is going to lead one of the factions as well, and we're not going to like him because he's not traditional in any way and wants people to have allegiance to him rather than to the Mexican government. And then the guy that we end up liking the most, I think historically, is Zapata, who wants land redistribution, but wants the people to be loyal to the Republic of Mexico rather than, Carranza or Villa or Zapata. So there's like 4 or 5 different factions, and they're fighting over control of Mexico. And honestly, they're killing each other, or pushing each other out. And the reason that people would leave is because they didn't want to get killed. I know that's just super general explanation, but hopefully slightly useful. But you could take an entire class on the Mexican Revolution and it would still be confusing. I have done so, and it's still confusing. Although we should talk more about it than we do, except, not US or not directly part of US history. Thanks for asking a question. I appreciate it. All right, back to World War I. I know some of you had coaches last year for world history. Yes. That one you can say yes on, right? Trying to think who still teaches world history at Cedar Park High School. When I was there, who taught world history? Let me think about it. Who did teach world history when I was there? The lady that taught Spanish as well. Aguilar. I like her too, and I'm just tired today, so I can think of her name. Because my husband taught Spanish as well, so they were buddies. So Aguilar, she taught world history. I can't even remember who else. Did the tall guy that took my place, did he teach world history? There's one guy who's super tall. But anyway, but you may have had a coach that taught world history. It's possible. Sometimes you do. And the coaches really like the analogy kind of things. They're kind of simple. They kind of work. And this one really kind of works, I think. So go coaches. Good job. My goodness. So there are 4 main reasons for World War I, and so they spell out main. So M is for militarism. So countries built up their militaries and wanted to use them. A is for alliances, which one of you already described incredibly well, so good job on that. And one of the I is for imperialism, wanting to build an empire. So what Austria-Hungary was trying to do by taking over Bosnia and Serbia. And N for nationalism, and just the idea that you want to promote your country because your country is better, that sort of thing. And it's not quite to the point of xenophobia where you think everyone else should disappear, either directly or indirectly, because your country's better. But nationalism is just a strong pride in your country. Now, when World War I starts with all the stuff you talked about earlier, and we talked about the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, which kind of kicked in all that alliance system, we just want to stay out of this foolishness. We don't want to have anything to do with this because we have an ocean that's going to keep us safe, and that's all we want. We don't want to participate. We just want to stay out of it. So we're going to stay on our side of the ocean and sell stuff to both sides, because that's what we do. Go Team USA. So we're going to sell stuff to both sides. Now, when we do that, which we'll do in World War I and World War II, it tends to irritate both sides. Now, one side will tell us, like the England-France side's like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you selling to both sides? You're supposed to be our friend. And Germany will just say like, hey, stop selling to both. Well, Germany actually is kind of okay with us selling to both sides, but when we stop selling to them, they sink our ships, because, it's what they do. So at first we're cool with whatever's going on. We're selling to both sides a little, but mostly we're staying out of it. And you see a lot of groups develop in the United States that are anti-war groups, like Veterans of Future Wars, Women for Peace, Students for Peace. And they, of course, oppose US entry into World War I. We also have large groups of immigrants who might be on opposite sides. So they tend to favor the home team, whatever their country they were from. And we really don't want stuff to break out in the United States. We don't want to have our own problems here. So it's like, we'll just pick a side quietly, personally, but the country is going to stay out. And then stuff starts to happen. The Lusitania gets sunk, merchant ships get sunk, the Sussex and the Housatonic, and Then the British make these, no, excuse me. The Germans make the Sussex Pledge after they sink the Sussex, which is a US ship. And then we have an election. And we elect Woodrow Wilson for term number 2 because he kept us out of war, which is his slogan. He kept us out of war. And he did. But as soon as he gets reelected, he increases the size of the military, which doesn't sound to me like he's going to keep us out of war, but I could be wrong. Maybe you make the military big to keep you out of war. I'm guessing that's not why you do it, but he does it, and the military starts to get bigger. And then the next election, or the next Congress, passes a Selective Service Act, which sounds to me like we might be getting ready to draft people. Could be wrong, but that's kind of what it sounds like to me. So as we get ready to draft people, it sounds less and less like he's keeping us out of war. So, darn. Let me ask you another question because I'm just excited about questions today. So, are you ready? Here it is. Maybe I'll type it in. What is the Selective Service Act? So, what is Selective Service? Now, some of you know this, I bet, because you get to participate in something similar when you turn 18. So, what is Selective Service? It's where I expect all the dudes to have the answer.
All able-bodied men must sign up to be eligible to go to the military.
Okay, that is it. Connor, I feel as though they should all pay you for being spokesperson today. Or maybe I'll just give you an A and everyone else gets a C.
Does that mean I don't have to do my questions?
You know, we should work on this. We should make a deal. We should make a deal, shouldn't we? I should at least spot you one question, right? Seems
All right.
only fair. I may have to make a note of that. Well, maybe someone else will answer a question now. It's like, what? We might get a free question out of this? I don't know. But no, I got to remember you when I'm grading. All right. So Selective Service is exactly what Connor said. You got to sign up because we might want to stick you into war. Now, to have a draft, we have to pass an additional law, which is a draft law, and then we can put you into the military. Now, just for the record, for those of you who are nervous, if anyone besides Connor is paying attention, I know some of you are, by the way. But, we haven't drafted anybody since the 1970s, so there's not a good chance that you're getting drafted. I would strongly suggest we will never draft anyone again because the military works in such a different way. You know, we have such good equipment. We don't need as many people. We don't want you having control of the good equipment if you don't want to be in the military because you could cause a lot of destruction. So there you go, just my thought. All right, back to our business here. So we passed the Selective Service Act, and then Woodrow Wilson starts off 1917 with his somewhat famous speech, Peace Without Victory, where he suggests to our European allies, and not allies, the other European nations that are fighting, that they should just stop fighting. If they would just stop fighting, the war would be over. That's all you need to do. That's sort of the way your parents dealt with you. I don't know, are you old enough to have fought in the car on trips? Or did you all have your phone in your earbuds? Maybe you all had your phone in your earbuds. Back in my day, we fought in the back seat of the car, how it used to be. But your day, maybe you all watched a movie or you had your phones or something. But parents would just say, just stop fighting. That was never effective, never. I can't remember one time it worked where we said, you know what, we really shouldn't be fighting. Let's stop. Countries, yeah, it didn't work with them either. All right, we've already talked about the main thing. Now we're going to talk about why the U.S. enters the war. And you already know this. Some of it is thinking that kind of upset us, but they stopped that at least long enough to help Woodrow Wilson get reelected. Maybe they did try to interfere in our election. I don't know. honestly, if you study that sort of stuff, election interference kind of things, you'll notice that that has gone on historically for a long time, and that we also mess with other countries to potentially interfere in their elections too, because, you know, why not? If you can do it, it's fun, right? Okay, next thing, Zimmerman telegram. So this is where the Germans send a telegram to the Mexican government and they say, hey, Mexico, we know you don't like the United States. Perhaps you start some stuff with them along the border, keep them out of the European conflict. Then when the European conflict is over, we go over and we help you defeat the United States. And guess what you can have back? All the land you lost in 1848. Now, they were mad about the land they lost in 1848, and they were not impressed with the United States, especially under Woodrow Wilson, where we occasionally will invade the northern part of Mexico or take over the port city of Veracruz because we think we can keep it open and safer better than they can, and we don't ask Mexican permission. So they are irritated with us already. And they are frustrated that they lost a big chunk of their country that they didn't want to lose. Although somebody in my last class said, well, but we did pay them. Yes, we did. However, they still weren't terribly impressed by that. So this is not an unreasonable proposition. Not unreasonable. It is possible they might be interested in this. However, some other government intercepts the telegram. It would be England, and they decode it, and then they publish the text of the telegram in all of their newspapers, and then consequently it gets published in all of our major newspapers. And then the American public goes, what? Germany wants Mexico to declare war on us? Well, Germany, we're tired of you people. Let's declare war on you. So there's a push in the United States to declare war on Germany because they were trying to get one of our neighbors to declare war on us. So we do. We declare war on Germany right about the same time that the Russians withdraw from World War I, the Great Wars, what they called it, because they have just gone through their own revolution and turned into the Soviet Union, and their new leaders have decided that being involved in this conflict is not in their best interest. So the Allied powers are losing Russia but gaining the United States. And it might be a net gain because we are not having a revolution. So we're a little more unified. We're a lot more unified than Russia during this time period. Okay. So Wilson will give a big long speech because he's a professor and we give big long speeches. And his speech will be the 14-point speech. 14 points. Is that too many points for a speech? Have you had a speech class yet? Do they tell you to give 14 points in your speech? I know that they don't. Don't even tell me that they do. All right. So among Wilson's 14 points are freedom of the seas. So you should not sink other people's ships. We especially want that because a lot of our ships were getting sunk. Self-determination. Now, self-determination kind of sounds all Rosie the Riveter-ish, like go team, we can do this. What it really means is that each nation can determine how they're governed and who lives within their borders. And the who lives within their borders part, that might have to do with ethnic groups. It probably does, because what we notice is that some of the ethnic groups around Austria-Hungary, Central Europe, are probably, they were fighting with each other, they were fighting over territory, they didn't mix well within the same country. So you'll notice that as this war ends, they're going to subdivide into even smaller states. And their thought is, if we can have a nation for Serbs and a nation for Croats and a nation for Bosnians and a nation for Poles and that sort of thing, then people won't fight within the same country and we won't have any more of these civil wars that expand and turn into international wars. So now, because the United States is a little different, this doesn't really fit with how we do things. So we don't have a state where, everybody of Japanese descent lives, in a state where everybody of Chinese descent lives, in a state where everybody from El Salvador lives. We don't do that. It's not what we do. Now, understand that we don't all get along all the time the way we should, but we don't do that. So self-determination is not what it sounds like. Free trade is what it sounds like. Open diplomacy, the idea if we sign a treaty with somebody else that every part of that treaty is public and there's no secret clauses. No secret clauses. So the public part of the treaty and then the private part of the treaty. We don't have that. Just the public part of the treaty. Yeah. Creation of a peacekeeping organization to prevent future world wars. Sounds like a great idea. So they created the League of Nations, really under the direction of Woodrow Wilson. And then what you'll notice when we talk next time, and maybe you already know, is we don't join the League of Nations. So we create it, but we don't join it. And then we think about ending colonialism, where larger countries take over colonies or start colonies, take over smaller countries and start colonies. But then we remember that we're doing that. So is our best friend England. So we're going to say that colonies or that colonizing nations should consider the best interest of the people within those colonies as they govern them. So we're kind of still in the white man's burden mode there. You know what I mean? Did you guys read? You had world history. You must have read the Rudyard Kipling white man's burden kind of thing. I will just assume you have. But Western Europeans, English-speaking countries kind of think that they're destined to run countries that are somehow lesser than they are, and to manage them because they can't manage themselves. We wouldn't approve of that in the modern era, but in that era, it seemed perfectly logical. Who can understand? All right, so colonialism is modified but could continue, and all of these things gave progressives hope of spreading reform globally. So it's how Woodrow Wilson got his progressive backers to back the idea of entering the World War. Okay, all right. So we will kind of start to talk about what's going on in the homeland during World War I next time, which will help answer the question a little bit better, the weekly question. But before we go, I want to make sure that I got the roll correct and that maybe you had the opportunity to ask questions. I think the only person I did not see on my roll list is Gracie. You guys see Gracie? It's not. This is the only time I can get you guys to talk, is if I say I don't see you. Kids that won't talk. All right, I think I'm going to switch to high school requirements where you have to show your face all the time. I think I want to do that. Some of you never show your face. That's crazy. All right, I'm going to stop recording so that I can say more rude stuff to you. Okay, that's not why I'm going to stop recording.